Well, we're seeing some really, really devastating images out of the Bahamas. Please keep them in your prayers. They were hit with a hurricane with 185 mile per hour winds. And we've, in Florida's history, have seen exactly one hurricane make landfall at 185 mile per hour, the Labor Day hurricane in 1935. And so they are in a really precarious situation. This storm is slowing down. It's likely to continue to administer really significant punishment over the next day. As of 5 o'clock, the storm was about 175 miles east of Palm Beach and moving to the west at 5 miles per hour. We are continuing to make all necessary precautions and urging people out in the state of Florida to make their preparations, heed evacuation orders. Now, this storm has tracked further west slightly, but still further west than we had hoped. I mean, we were hoped that it would air on the eastern side of that track. It's aired a little bit closer to the Florida coast. The storm has slowed down, but we do need it to slow down just a little bit more to ensure when it turns north that it's not impacting directly the Florida coast. And we cannot say that that is not a possibility. And so I think it's important that we prepare for this to potentially make landfall here. I held a conference call with members of the Florida legislature, with all the county emergency management directors. The good news is we've worked great with the counties. We're all working together. My wife, the First Lady, put out a public service announcement this afternoon with important message for people to listen to their local authorities and have an evacuation plan ready if you are ordered to evacuate. Safety comes first, and you don't want to mess with the storm that is going at 185 miles per hour. And her PSA is posted on social media. So we now have we've seen a significant increase in watches and warnings. A hurricane warning is in effect for Palm Beach, Martin, St. Lucie, Indian River, and Brevard counties, and a storm surge warning is in effect for those counties. A hurricane watch is in effect for Volusia County, and so is a storm surge watch. Now, there will absolutely be additional hurricane warnings and watches all the way up to the Georgia border on the east coast of Florida. So you can pretty much set your clock to that. And you could see tropical storm force winds arriving on Florida's Treasure Coast as early as late tonight. And of course, you have storm surge in places like Jupiter Inlet, forecast to be between 4 and 7 feet. There's a number of evacuation orders that have been issued. Volusia County, Indian River County, Duval County, Nassau County, and St. Johns County. They've all issued new orders today. And of course, Martin, Palm Beach, Brevard, St. Lucie had issued orders already. We've also have a number of counties that have issued voluntary evacuation orders: Osceola, Glades, Hendry, Okeechobee, Highland. If you are in an area that has flooded in prior hurricanes and you're given a voluntary evacuation order, you really need to seriously consider heeding that and evacuating. When the water gets high, there's not a whole lot you can do about that. And given the uncertainty of the storm, it's better to err on the side of safety. The Coast Guard is beginning to lock down some movable bridges to marine traffic. But to be clear, these bridges are still open to motorists. And of course, if there's any changes to that, we'll announce that. Palm Beach International will cease all commercial air service beginning tomorrow, and Orlando Melbourne International plans to close on Monday evening. We're monitoring every road in the state, FDOT, and the traffic has not been abnormal. In fact, I think the non-hurricane related traffic has probably been less than we would typically have on a Labor Day weekend, and we obviously will make accommodations to make sure that those subject to evacuation orders are able to evacuate as efficiently as possible. By tonight, the Florida National Guard will have 4,500 soldiers and airmen activated and ready to respond. They have 15 rotor wing helicopters available. An additional 24 have been offered from regional National Guard locations, and the active Army component has pre-positioned 40 additional helicopters near our state border to respond if needed. And so we are taking this storm and the potential impacts on Florida very seriously. I hope that we watch a track over the next 24 hours and see that the threat to Florida has diminished, but we are not banking on that at all, and we are preparing for a significant event. And with that, I can take a couple questions.
Governor, can you answer, with all the counties that have done mandatory evacuations of their barrier islands and coastal areas, why are we seeing so little traffic on our major highways?
Well, I think part of it is the traffic overall. This is not the typical Labor Day weekend, given that you had hurricane news going on really for several days now, probably even at the beginning of the week. I think we were starting to look at this. And so I think that probably impacted the natural traffic. And I also think that if you look at, say, Palm Beach County, those evacuation zones A and B, that's a high percentage of seasonal residents. A lot of those folks on that coast are not necessarily staying in Florida in August, in September. And so, but I think that folks have been willing to take steps to prepare. I mean, you saw people lining up for gas, you saw water flying off the shelves, and people have been through this drill before, so sometimes there can be message fatigue. But I also think at the same time, they understand that if you're prepared, you're going to be much better off if you take those steps. And so we appreciate, I think, having worked with the counties to get in a place where they can protect their residents. And obviously, we appreciate Floridians making preparations.
With the shift going to the west just a little bit, just a little bit less than you guys would have liked, has that prompted you guys to make any changes in how you responded, maybe reallocating resources or repositioning them?
We're always planning. I mean, like, we never thought that we could just assume it wasn't going to impact Florida. I mean, so that's kind of been how we were. I think what we would have liked to have seen is it slow down more and then take kind of that eastern track within the guidance. Because that would have been good to tell people that, but we're certainly not going to tell people that if that's not what's going to happen. So I think the resources have been ready because when you have a storm of this magnitude, I mean, even the track that keeps it off the coast, it ain't like it's 100 miles off the coast. I mean, it gets to be about 25 miles off the coast in some areas, and so that's way too close for comfort, even if that were gospel. So, it hasn't changed anything we've done. I think once we knew it was going to be more of an East Coast event, we started having the resources more focused on that. I mean, you remember 3 or 4 days ago, it was not out of the question that you had a southern hit in South Florida coming out to the Gulf of Mexico and then hitting the Panhandle. That obviously would have been a major challenge when you're talking about the most populated part of the state, a state in part of Southwest Florida that had just been hit by Irma 2 years ago, and then the Panhandle potentially where the Michael victims were. And so that was really a problem. Now the resources, we know where the guard's going to be needed. We know where FHP and DOT are going to need to help with the roads. The utilities have a better sense of where they're going to need to go when power goes out. And so in that sense, I think that it's made it a more focused effort, which our state this big, that's just, there's logistical challenges sometimes, but I think we kind of know where the issues will be.
The search chief made the point about an hour ago during the briefing that there are a fair number of people who are taking vacations out of state, and he expects or would hope that they would extend their vacations by a few days to ease their return to Florida. Will you be calling for that?
Well, look, I think people need to do what's in their best interest. They know kind of, depending on where they live. Obviously, I would not recommend somebody, going to Melbourne tomorrow if they're out of state. I mean, I think you probably would be better off to wait and see how this thing shakes out. And so that's just kind of the way the cookie crumbles. It's. I mean, look, I was planning on, my wife and kids. We were going to have fun with our kids this weekend on Labor Day. I know a lot of Floridians have had plans and are having fun elsewhere, and so they just got to make the best decision, for their family. But clearly, when you're talking about that area that's within the cone, I think that would be a real problem to just assume that you can come back with no problems.
The forecast seems to have it spin for 2-3 days along our coast. As prepared as you guys are getting, is it going to take more time and be more difficult to get resources down to people that stay behind because it's going to sit there for that long?
So as the storm goes north, you're going to see resources come following the storm. So when we had the meeting with the president and spoke with FEMA, you can see where they have assets pre-positioned. They have them in southern Florida. Obviously, as this thing looks to be tracking, kind of north of Palm Beach, and if it starts moving up the coast that way, they're going to take those southern Florida assets and bring them to follow the track. And I think the same thing is true with the utilities. I mean, they recognize that you can have significant impacts in Palm Beach County and Martin counties, and so that the storm could still be near St. Augustine, and it may have passed in that area. And obviously, they're going to want to get in there and be able to help those folks who've already experienced the effects. All right. Well, we're going to be monitoring this tonight. We'll have any more updates. We'll put it out for y'all. I mean, we'll be back here doing more briefings tomorrow for sure. I don't know if we're going to do any more tonight, but at the end of the day, please prepare because this is a big boy. Thanks.